hello, and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Productions channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Album of the Week episode. This is episode number 246. And so for today's episode, I am here to celebrate the 40th anniversary for Stay Hungry, the mega hit third consecutive album for Twisted Sister. Originally released on May 10th, 1984 via Atlantic Records. So, without further ado, let's begin. With such a successful album and You Can't Stop Rock and Roll under the band's belt, however, with the early relationship with the people over at Atlantic Records, they thought nothing could come of it. Until December, when everything would start to change. After a meeting between J.J. French and label president Doug Morris took place, after being shown letters from promoters around the world praising the band's stage performances, Doug Morris would promise the band the whole fucking world to them. And boy, did he ever. During this time, Twisted Sister were already writing material for their next album. The label would hire veteran producer Tom Worman and as well engineer Jeff Workman to work with the band for their third album. Recording took place over at a few studios in two different states. First, the recording ended up taking place at the record plant in New York. Then, of course, everything would be taken to California with Westlake Studios in Los Angeles and Cherokee Studios in Hollywood, California. During these sessions, tensions were brewing between the band and producer Tom Worman, especially in the case with Dee Snider. Worman apparently brought in a Saxon album, or a couple depending on the story that you at least read from, and apparently he even suggested that they cover Strong Arm of the Law. But according to Dee Snider, he felt that him and JJ felt, insulted by his band submission, the cover submission. And I'm sorry, I don't know about you, but clearly Tom Worman hadn't even listened to one fucking Saxon album or a Twisted Sister album to begin with, or otherwise he would have at least knew how similar the two bands were to each other. So personally, it just comes across as like Tom Worman was just bringing in these albums to just show off that he's so down with the bands that these young metalheads are listening to. Pretentious goof. So because of this, Tom kept shooting songs down that the band wanted on the album, especially when it comes to the case with J.J. French, which caused J.J. to be rather unpleased with the label's hiring of this guy, and you can say the same for also Dee Snider as well. Again, they were just like completely looking at Atlantic like, why the hell did you pair us with this guy? Again, compared to who they had worked with prior, the guy it just came across as a complete know-it-all, pretentious, goofy, hard ass that just did not understand what the band was wanting to at least do with their album. He just thought, again, every wish comes with a consequence, and this certainly came with a consequence. They were given the world, they were promised the world, and it came with this. So, in the case for the band, they were so displeased with the label's producer hiring that they just had to man up and just stick with it for the remainder of the sessions and just get the album over with. So, with that, after going through about 20 songs total, 10 were chosen, with 2 of the songs being spliced together to create one epic-length track, therefore making the album to have 9 tracks total. And so before I really get into the let's say the main songs for the album, the ones that were ultimately picked. So with that, let me run through what was left off the album. Which eventually, these are the songs that were used as, let's say, a part of the bonus disc to the 25th anniversary edition of the album, which is the one that I own and I've had for like almost over 10 years now, again, getting it as part of my 15th birthday in 2009. So let me go through these songs again. Most of them are again on the second disc. And so again, the ones that were completely cut from the album and never made it past these early sessions were Death from Above, Prime Motivator, Death Run, This One's For You, We're Coming On, Call My Name, Pay the Price, which is definitely not exactly the one that would get turned into The Price. So it's like, again, these are 2 different tracks with a bit of a similar sort of title, using the same words and stuff. And then there's What's Love Without You, One Voice Will Be Heard, and You Got to Fight. I don't know if the new recording that was for the this 25th anniversary edition was a Title 30. I don't know if that was somewhat written during these sessions, but again, they also added in, so I don't know. I can't really quite confirm whether or not if the song 30 was exactly part of it. And it's been a while since I've really read through the entire sort of booklet where they did a whole completely backstory write-up on the whole recording process for the album, but it might have been something brand new just for the release of the album that kind of gives something for the diehard Twisted Sister fan. But it could have easily been a song that was originally written during the sessions that just didn't get to be recorded. So there it is. So at that, finally, with choosing these 9 tracks, by May 10th, 1984, Stay Hungry was released. And so, featuring 9 tracks, clocking at the length of 36 minutes and 58 seconds, these 9 tracks are, of course, kicking off with the title track into We're Not Gonna Take It, Burn in Hell, the rather epic, long, somewhat 2-part track that is titled Hard Terrier, parentheses, the beginning, which again, this features both Captain Howdy and Street Justice. By the way, for the record, Captain Howdy is not really about the character, or whatever the character that Linda Blair's character from The Exorcist, Reagan, refers to. It's not that exact character. It's, if anything, it ends up referring to the character that Dee Snider would come up with for his movie, from like 1998, titled Strangeland. So that's all it really ends up being a future reference to. So completely different and completely removed from anything regarding The Exorcist. Then, of course, we then get into I Wanna Rock, The Price, Don't Let Me Down, The Beast, and SMF, which of course is the short initials for Sick Motherfucker. So there you go, folks. There's your 9 tracks for Stay Hungry. So with all the hype and this huge promotion just surrounding the release of Stay Hungry, did it end up living up to its hype and reputation? Now, while I have a sentimental fondness for this album, after had going backwards into their discography, with their first 2 albums, something is like missing here. Okay, the songs are here, and besides the 2 juggernaut radio hits that were given highly produced music videos, all featuring actor Mark Metcalf, and so with the album, it does have plenty of great cuts here though, that I feel are on par with what you had gotten previously, like with the red, smokin' hot fury of the opening title track, and Don't Let Me Down, to even like the greasy AC/DC inspired rocker that is SMF. Again, it's a song that is pretty much a reference to what they referred to their fans as, their die-hard core fans as, again, sick motherfuckers. To even the album's darker, more brooding bangers like Burn in Hell. And then, of course, switch to the two-in punch of Captain Howdy and Street Justice, which both make up the track Hearteria, The Beginning. And then, of course, there is The Beast, which is a bit more on the bluesy side. Again, not too far off from the type of bluesy sort of fused, heavy sort of metal that you had got on the previous album, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. Again, with all of these songs, they all would have fit greatly on Under the Blade. Again, given the attitude for these songs, again, they just have the same aura to them, and I think they would have all fit great. And of course, one of my personal favorites here is the somewhat emotional, melancholic number of The Price. It's very similar to You're Not Alone off of the previous album. To me, it's a really good companion track to that song. Dee just pours his heart and soul into this one. And so in general, there's still plenty of gutsy ball breakers here. Finally, there is the two gigantic hits that pretty much turned Twisted Sister into superstars. However, as much as I have a soft spot for We're Not Gonna Take It, I've kind of grown to dislike these to an extent, especially in the case for I Wanna Rock. As a little kid growing up in the early 2000s, yeah, this song somewhat appealed to me, again, first hearing it in Grand Theft Auto Vice City as part of the V-Rock radio station, which again was a fake radio station for the game that would play plenty of 80s metal bands and even rock bands in general that I ended up becoming fans of. So it kind of worked in the case with Twisted Sister here, and especially with I Wanna Rock. And so again, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that it made an impression on me. But now since I've grown up, it really comes across as being ridiculously silly. But I think that was initially the point, since Tom Werman was just badgering on the band for not coming up with enough radio hits. So they probably mocked him by coming up with I Wanna Rock for just shits and giggles, and thinking the chorus and title is so goddamn lame, it can't possibly become any more of a hit. Well, to quote a certain late drugged out funkster, cocaine's a hell of a drug. Now, as far as We're Not Gonna Take It is concerned, this actually has some thought behind it. It's like the least egregious song out of the two, as it does have a pretty good message behind it. Something that Rob Halford would, attempt to recreate, but that's for another time. So while I do like We're Not Gonna Take It, it's far from my favorite. However, if this album had a much beefier sound, then I might think differently. So that's what brings me to this part of my sort of thesis for the album, is that this is where I feel what kind of holds the album back. And again, it's something I might have alluded to earlier, and it definitely just comes in the form of Tom Werman's touch. The man never really had a mesmerizing vision for what an album is supposed to sound like to him. He's not really Bob Ezrin. He's not even, good lord, am I eating my words here, Robert Mutt Lange, who I still don't necessarily like, or even has that down-to-earth personality that guys like the late Martin Birch, Tom Allom, Jack Douglas, Chris Singerides, Max Norman, Tony Platt, etc. and etc. all had. Tom just never possessed any of those qualities in my opinion. His albums, and even from reading, his interviews and stuff, just getting a good understanding of his whole personality, especially when it came to rebuttaling Dee Snider's sort of opinions of working with Tom Werman, he just comes across as the guy who just makes the album for the label to make money off of. He doesn't think of it as art, doesn't think of it as an extension of the artist's personality. It's just another paycheck for Tom Werman, and from listening to the albums he produced, fits my critique of him. I'm sorry. It just does. The only album that I truly feel that he got right with was Motley Crue's Shot at the Devil. But beyond that, nothing sticks itself out within, his production work. To me, the best person that I could compare Tom Worman to is Thomas Kinkade. And therefore, he's just the Thomas Kinkade of the music business. And that's not to try and knock at the deceased. I just truly feel that he basically creates kitsch. And that is technically what he was doing here with Twisted Sister. Stripping the band of its identity for kitsch art. And folks, that's not really a compliment. That's a negative. You're not really supposed to compliment kitsch art. It's what it is. It's just basically painting made for money, just to make money and make profit, and that's all. You're not really putting any complete heart into it. You're just creating a whole bunch of paintings and just selling them off and thinking that they are. At least guys like H.R. Geiger, yes, as far as, let's say, completely outsider that he was and very unconventional, the guy had a vision for what he wanted his art to be. In the case for what you hear negative about Thomas Kinkade and what you kind of got from him when he was alive, it wasn't exactly that. Yes, the guy can paint, but even a great painter can just paint. There has to be some sort of meaning behind it. There really has to be some sort of passion. I just don't get that with Tom Worman, and therefore that's why I can kind of compare Tom Worman to the deceased painter Thomas Kinkade. So while Twisted Sister were definitely satisfied with what has come out with the sales, the hype, and just everything surrounding the album, and in the wake of the album, and again, all of this just coming from just this meeting with Atlantic Records and them, of course, pushing for keeping their previous audience, but trying to build an even new, at least bring in newer audiences into it to kind of at least to extend the numbers of their fan base. Well, with every wish comes with consequences, and these consequences became just as much more hurdles for them. With the rise of Tipper Gore's PMRC, that meant that they were looking for some targets, which eventually led to them knowing about Twisted Sister. And if there were any bands that became the poster children for the PMRC's attack against heavy metal, then it certainly were both Wasp and Twisted Sister. And in the case for Twisted Sister, came in the form of the music video for We're Not Gonna Take It, which were made to actually mock people like Tipper Gore, using actor Mark Metcalf to portray a hyper-realistic depiction of a strict religious parents, of the 50s and 60s, which is kind of funny given that after portraying a character that was played these tropes that rallied against rock and roll and just considered it to be the devil or demon, he actually would go on to play a demon in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This, of course, disgusted the PMRC that they would then go on to form the notorious Filthy 15, which I already had covered in my episode for Defenders of the Faith. And with that, we all know where all this led to. And I don't need to drag something on for this long, in this episode on just something that has already been covered 100 gazillion times. Dee Snider pretty much just went into the Senate House and opened up a vicious can of whoop-ass on them old crippled geezers so badly that, again, I just don't need to go on any further about it. Because after all, while the PMRC got their wish to put their parental advisory labels onto these records that contained explicit content. But in the end, it was the audience that won the fight, because all it told them was that was the album to buy. The end. So there you have it. While the band everything just showed that they were satisfied with, at least with everything with the album as far as what it ended up doing to their popularity and, of course, to their bank accounts and everything. However, once again, like I alluded to with The Wish and so on, that Dee Snider at least challenging the execs over at Atlantic that they would want to keep their previous number of audience, but also want to gain more audiences. Again, even with all the controversy and everything that was surrounding the album, what really ended up hurting the band was the image that eventually the label and so on ended up, well, giving the band. And therefore, the audience that they had ended up feeling jaded basically in the return. And therefore, as you can tell by, let's say, what would be coming to the following year of 85, well, you pretty much end up understanding where things end up going to, and it leads to an even bigger problem for the band itself. And so the story for that shall be told whenever I cover Come Out and Play. But for right now, we're focusing still on Stay Hungry, and since this is the end of this episode, we know where this is now leading into, and therefore, if obviously you grew up with this album, and therefore any fans of this album, or let's say even detractors, any of the ones I might alluded to that might be part of that number of fan base that felt jaded by this album, you know what to do. And therefore, if your thoughts or whatever are either positive or negative, you can leave them all down in the comment section below. But if you're obviously, let's say, unfamiliar with Twisted Sister or even Stay Hungry in general, it's definitely a worthy album to check out. However, like you kind of got from my thoughts to begin with, it's always still best to go backwards and check out how they sounded much earlier. And so you can at least, when you finally get to this album, you understand why everything started to become split between the first original audience and eventually the audience that would come afterwards in the wake of this album. So, there you go. But still, it's still a worthy album to check out, and again, in its 40th anniversary, it's still worthy. So, there you go, folks. There's my overall thoughts on Stay Hungry. So with that, this is Silver Thrash saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.